Wall Street sex scandal time. So there has been yet another development in this story that we've been following from the very beginning. It's been blowing up Wall Street. I know it's been blowing up your social media account, your page, yeah? You remember the story began when JPMorgan exec Lorna Hajjdini was accused in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit by her former co-worker, Chiraya Ranu, of allegedly drugging him, threatening him, making him into her sex slave. Well, Hajjdini and JPMorgan, which was also named in the suit, denied the allegations, and Hajjdini filed a countersuit for claims like defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, arguing that Rana's claims were fake and turned her into a tabloid fixture and tarnished her reputation. The case took another turn earlier this month when Rana filed to withdraw his lawsuit, which was filed in state court, so he could refile it in federal court. And I mentioned a number of strategic reasons to do that. It can be quicker, federal courts can be more adept at handling federal claims. The rules are different. And Rana even got a new legal team, high-profile attorneys for the federal suit, which promised substantial new evidence, though they didn't provide any specifics as of now. But Hajjdini and JPMorgan's attorneys are seeking to block that federal lawsuit, accusing his new attorneys of gamesmanship. The defense also accused Rana of forum shopping, said that he was trying to avoid complying with basically an unfavorable ruling from the state court judge regarding filing the case anonymously, and they argue the suit should be dismissed with prejudice, meaning that Rana's lawyers wouldn't be able to file it again. Now, Rana's attorneys have fired back at the defense's accusations. Here's the big headline. This is the biggest development, in my opinion. They requested to have Rana's previous attorney, who asked to withdraw from the case in late May, no reason given, to tell the court about possible false evidence and statements. Today, the judge granted those requests, telling Rana's old attorney he could withdraw from the state case, but he has to disclose any false statements in the original suit. That is huge. Now, Rana's attorneys have yet to respond to the judge's decision today, but how's that going to work? What would he say? Could it bolster? Could it derail Rana's suit? Joining me now to break it down. This story is trial lawyer, litigator, legal analyst, partner, and vice chair of Tarter, Krinsky & Drogan LLP's litigation practice, my friend Richard Schoenstein. Good to see you. To me, this is a huge development. If his attorney, former attorney, how does it work? He's going to come up and say, yeah, he told me to file false claims. None of this is real. I don't know if that's true or not, but is that potentially what we're dealing with?
I think that's goes a little farther than what we're dealing with. I think this goes to actual statements. There's an affidavit from the plaintiff that was filed in this case, and the defense pointed to some statements in the affidavit that appear to have been, false or misrepresented to some extent. And I think they're saying he has to correct any statements that the plaintiff has made in the case.
So I know that they specifically called out what his mother did for a living and also about what the internal conversations were with JPMorgan about settlement negotiations. But the big thing is, are these statements about Hajjdini and what she is accused of doing, are they real or not? Now, I haven't heard. It's interesting because there's attorney-client privilege. He can't explain the conversations he had with Rana, but he could potentially be in a position to say, I withdrew because I didn't believe what he was saying?
He could be, but it's probably going to be limited to the actual statements made under oath in the case and not to the allegations or the spin that's been put on the facts, and certainly not to disclosing anything that's privileged. It's correcting false evidence that's been submitted in the case.
Now, if that's the case, whatever it is, if there was any potential alleged false statement, it does go to Rana's credibility. I imagine his defense attorneys are going to try to block his former attorney from doing this, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think they would do something. I mean, again, it depends on what it is. I would assume they'll have some dialogue with the former attorney to try to figure out what he might be saying prior to him saying it. He might say nothing. I don't know. I just don't know what to make of it until we see it.
Let's talk about the federal lawsuit. So now you have this back and forth, and we've talked about the advantages of going to federal court. I'm going to read you off some of the arguments that Lorna Hajjdini and JPMorgan Chase have put forward. They say, allowing this to move to federal court unfairly prejudices Hajjdini. She's already filed counterclaims. She served discovery requests. She's already spent time, money, and resources into this. that a federal refiling would be unfair. It would be repetitive. You're talking about the same kind of discovery and depositions and motions. You might have
Can I stop you? Can I stop you
Wait,
at
let me
this
have one more.
Okay.
Inconsistent rulings and verdicts. Is this any good arguments or no?
I don't think so. This case is 2 months old, which is one thing the plaintiff says in their papers. The case was filed 2 months ago. Nothing of any substance has happened in the case. If she served discovery demands, she can serve them in the federal case. You just transfer one to the other. She can either keep her counterclaims in state court or she can move them to federal. She has the option, according to the plaintiff, so it's not going to prejudice those. It's a little bit prejudicial to have to litigate one case in 2 different courts, which might happen here, but it's not a huge amount of prejudice.
Where does JPMorgan want to go, state or federal?
Federal, and that is sort of odd to me because a big financial institution like that, I'm sorry, they want to stay in state court.
They want to stay in state court.
Okay. Both defendants want to stay in state court. And for a big financial institution to be clinging to state court rather than to move to federal court is a little bit odd.
And again, this would be an advantage for him to go to federal court because he says he has federal claims, right? But also, what are some more of the advantages?
His new lawyers want to reset. He's got new lawyers. They clearly don't like the judge. The judge denied his application to proceed anonymously. The judge is giving his lawyer a hard time about withdrawing. They clearly don't like this state court judge, and I think they want to reset with a new judge. Moving it to federal court is a vehicle that allows that. There are a lot of reasons to prefer federal court over state court. The claims can be asserted in either state court or federal court, so that doesn't matter. I just think they want to restart.
Is there a possibility this case is going to get thrown out now? I mean, if he can't go to federal court, is he just going to drop it?
I don't think he would just.
And I don't know what the judge would do here.
The state court judge could say, no, I'm not letting you withdraw it without prejudice. You have to either litigate it here or withdraw it without prejudice, in which case I think he would just litigate it in state court. I don't think he would just drop the case outright. But I expect at the end of the day, the judge to let him go to federal court.
I think this is a fascinating case. We actually covered it on our Hot Take, our digital show at 7 p.m. We got a ton of questions about it, a ton of comments. This case is not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere.
It's got important issues, but it has a million great procedural issues if you're a law geek.
But also, if the allegations are not true,
yeah,
and this is all against her, I have not seen a better case of harm suffered by somebody than her. The AI videos, the memes, but assuming these allegations are not true. I want to see where it goes. I want to see if we get to the bottom of it. Rich Schoenstein, thank you so much. Appreciate it.